The fact that they tried to make public sector workers very, very important in this debate should speak volumes about how much you should weigh them in debate. That is, that we're the only team that effectively gives you positive material about how these workers actually get better human rights. Also note that they only give you one-liner responses to pretty much majority of our material about the private sector. We ought to punish them for that horrible, unstrategic decision. So, what am I going to do in today's speech? I'm going to first look at their path to victory on the public sector, second on how they probably might gain public support, and then finally some mitigation stuff, and then I'm going to do some weighing about how we've actually won this debate. What do they tell you in the public sector? Basically that doctors and firefighters striking at the same time is an inherently bad thing. A couple reasons why we don't think this is necessarily the case. One, we think because these things are very highly planned and they're usually made to be convenient for people in society, because note that these strikes aren't trying to piss off people in society, they're trying to get the support of them. They're trying to piss off the government, but the perceived value of anger is something that still exists, but it's not something that actually results in meaningful harm. Like, we don't see strikes amassing thousands and thousands of deaths because there aren't people in the hospitals. Obviously then, strikes would never occur. They would probably just be banned straight away because, if 1 million people died as a result of the strike, that is something that is probably an event that is not going to occur again. So you can't claim that there are actually high-level impacts that exist because they don't exist in the status quo already. But second, I think even if this is likely to be true, that they're likely going to be very cautious about it. They're likely going to do it in a way that does minimize a lot of these harms and damages. Finally, then, we also just explained to you that it's probably likely also to be corporate workers as well, like an Amazon, like an Uber, and they don't really contend with this material. But even if you don't believe any of that, we still think it's relatively important. And that's why it's good for our team, because we flip it by saying that this is probably the most effective. Because if you want to believe them and say that it's the highest amount of impact, then you should also believe that the highest amount of impact is also for the result that you get, because you probably have a very effective strike that makes the government very scared, that people think, oh shoot, these people actually need human rights, we should probably give it to them, or chaos is likely to ensue. I think that at that point, all of their material about the public sector is completely flipped because they can't give you any good reason why the government doesn't fear the strikes themselves. So, what was their next path to victory? It was about public support and basically that people aren't going to like it, and I think this is also kind of contingent on the impacting that they get from the first point, which I've already disproven in this debate. So, either way, I'm going to contend with it. One, we think if it's due to the private sector, they don't get anything here because they don't do any attempt to mechanize or impact exactly why people dislike it, other than to say that people would maybe be annoyed, but I really don't think so. I think if their Amazon delivery is one day, probably they don't care, so I don't think that they can claim anything about the private sector that already does a great deal in mitigating the harm that they bring about this public support point. But second, people actually care about a lot of these strikes in the sense that they support them, because the fact that people haven't died as a result, the fact that people realize that they're probably not in a good system, that the people that are very important to the system, to our economy, are actually being harmed, I think people do actually care about it. And I don't think you can just assert that just because there is a level of annoyance that people automatically just hate all strikes. I think that's probably something that's been asserted in this debate, and I want to re-clarify that no, that people probably do care about it, because it does have positive effects on them. If it makes people more productive, if it makes people more likely to do a better job when it actually concerns their lives, like all the doctors and the firefighters that they tell you probably are incentivized to support it. Also, if there's literally just no harm of you supporting something, because if you're not part of that workforce, you're not scared you're going to be fired as a result. The only harm that they can give you is people are mildly more annoyed. We don't think that is a strong enough incentive for them to be able to prove this point. But third, I think there are a lot of narratives about the public sector being heroes, and I think those are very, very strong, like doctors and nurses being heroes, like policemen and firefighters also being fundamental parts of good in our society, counteract all of the low-level annoyance that they give you. All of the stuff that happened after COVID-19 and all the narratives that have arisen because of that are very, very strong in mitigating a lot of the annoyance factors that they might give you, and that's probably another reason why we actually get public support. So if you believe that it's important in this debate, we probably get that as well. But finally then, I think also that the government not being voted out proves that the backlash wasn't strong enough. And I think it proves that like the government can support a lot of these unions and negotiate them to where they actually get fair terms without them being voted out straight away, shows that people are not as pissed off and like by their mildly annoyance material as you might actually think. But I think even if, we don't even understand why we actually care about this, because as long as the government comes to like reasonable negotiations with a lot of these unions, why does public support even matter? I think at that point, their first path to victory doesn't even make sense, and they don't contend with any of our other material. And their second one doesn't even matter in this debate, and it shouldn't even be weighed very highly because it doesn't have a huge effect on the actual money that people are going to get as a result of these strikes. Finally then, some mitigation that they attempted. They said that the government like won't change because of political pressure, because of like legitimization issues. One, like how else do normal strikes already work in the status quo? Obviously they do, so I don't think you can just claim that. Second of all, like helping unions is obviously a good thing. Like they claim it's only in conservative governments that they don't care. Yeah, and then we get like liberal. So if you believe that there are half of them, we still get half of the benefit, and the other half, which were conservative, probably was symmetric. So they kind of just can see that we get a benefit there. And third and finally, negotiations still exist. It's not just like a one thing fits all. Next, they try to attempt to say that like people are replaceable because they're cheap, because they lack incentive. We gave you good reasons why there is a big amount of incentive, and also why even if it's cheap, it doesn't matter because everybody is in the strike. So finally then on when, what should you believe? First, uncertainty. Why are we more certain to get the better like status quo? First of all, because it's harder to get an alternative workforce. There is a result of more people actually joining the strike. But second, that there are more people that you have to replace. So corporations have to deal with a lot more stress finding people to replace. It's not as easy. But third, it increased the public support because you probably get pushbacks against all this company power. Fourth, then, these bigger unions are more likely to help the small unions. Their only response is to say that like bigger unions won't do anything because they don't really care. But we gave you really good incentives about why that's likely true. It's because once you build a relationship, you can keep helping each other. It's symbiotic. That is obviously a good thing for both parties, and it's an incentive that still exists. Then on scale, what do we get here? First of all of the signaling material that we've given to down the line, which wasn't really responded to. Second, pressure from the government obviously exists as well, because the bigger it is, the more pressure there is, the more incentive the government is to give you something. Third, global strikes. They haven't given you any incentive at all. Anything about minority countries, which if you want to weigh on vulnerability is important in this debate, they haven't responded to. And finally, just on vulnerability, obviously smaller unions get better because of solidarity and better relationships, but also the public workers that they believe are most important actually get rights. So not only do we win on their grounds, we flip all of their material. At the end of the day, Neg is left with nothing.